Welcome to Storypower TV. I'm your host, J. Lauren Norris, and I really look forward to spending time with you today. You know, one of the things we know about the kingdom is we often forget the quality of conversations when we get stuck in an industry. I'm in the speaking industry. There are a whole lot of people that get on the stage and they talk about whatever's important to them. And sometimes they talk about what's important to the crowd, but usually it's what's important to them. And we forget that our priorities, so long as we're on this earth, are really kingdom priorities. We really have a different job to do than just show up and do our job, pay the bills, and check out when the time comes. And we never know when the time comes. But on this program, on Storypower TV, we really just have one question, and that is, who is Jesus to you, and why do I care? And today you're going to get a chance to hear that question asked and answered of a man who has over 5 decades of marriage under his belt. Almost the same amount of time playing with classic cars and traveling around the country showing off some of the coolest cars you've ever seen in your life. Stay tuned, and you're going to get a chance to meet a new friend of mine by the name of Jim Rowlett right after this. Jim, I want to say thank you for being a part of the show and coming into the studio today. I know it was a bit of a drive, and you got to experience our local Crescent train.
Yeah,
and that's,
absolutely.
That's always an adventure by itself. But Jim, thanks for coming to being a part of what we're doing today.
Thanks for inviting us.
So I heard about LSSRA through Tammy Dooley from the Granbury Visitors. And when she first mentioned it, I heard her kind of talk about, we got this car show coming, it's really cool. You know, they've been coming off and on. We want them to make this their home, et cetera, et cetera. And there was one thing she said that really stood out to me because it didn't seem like the norm, I guess. And that was, she said, this is an organization that keeps faith at the forefront.
Yes.
And I thought, well, that's an interesting thing to say about a bunch of motorheads because, you know, I ride a motorcycle and I've been around those kind of guys. I've been in and out of the car scene, not of any note, not that anybody would know, but I've had classic cars and taken some apart and some of them I put back together. Yeah. But the idea of this being a faith-based organization was very intriguing to me. So tell me a little bit about Lonestar and how you got involved in it, and who is Jesus to you in this whole project, and why does it matter to the public?
Well, for me, you know, Jesus is my Lord and Savior. He paid the price for me. And I tell the street riders all the time, you know, he paid for you too. You know, it's a free gift. All you have to do is accept it. And we get to do a church service on Sunday morning at each one of our events. And as a matter of fact, we have a group from here in Granbury that does music for us.
Oh, wow.
Living Water. They'll come and do music Sunday morning. They're a real blessing. But part of our ministry is just to be where we are and visit with people, talk to them, share the gospel with them where we're given opportunity. And, you know, I think where we make a lot of mistakes is try to hammer stuff to people.
Yeah.
And they're not looking for hammering. They're looking, I had a guy ask me, first service I did in Springfield, Missouri, I was going up to do Sunday morning, and he said, I said, are you coming to church? And he said, I got to know something. And I said, what? He said, are you talking or are you preaching? And I said, I'm talking. He said, all right, I'll be there. And he came, and he continued to come. Because I'm not a preacher. You know, I carry that moniker. But, you know, for me, it's more of an opportunity to get with folks and share the good news. And I don't need to hammer them, you know. I look at what Jesus Christ did when he was here. You know, other than the temple, he didn't beat up most anybody. You know, right. It was about, let me tell you, the good news. And I feel like that's what we're called to do, is just be a witness to those around us. You know, we're not called to be judges. We're not called to be, attorneys. We're called to be witnesses, and that's what we want to do.
You know, I find there are a whole lot of people that, like you said, they want to pound it. They want to beat you over the head with the Bible. They want to tell you everything you've done wrong. And it's ironic that people have a hard time going to where the sinners are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I train a lot of salespeople, and when I'm training them, I say, you know, there's two things you got to do: identify your audience, and then build rapport with them.
Right.
And identify your audience means understanding who they are, what their problem is, where they are in their journey right now, and then going to that place.
Mm-hmm.
And then building rapport with them means, ideally, you have common ground with them in that place.
Right.
And it sounds like the hot rod scene, the classic car scene, the street rod scene has been that place for you where you have some common ground and some relationship and some credibility, so that your faith has an entree. Am I reading that right?
I think you're correct. I mean, I understand where they're coming from. You know, I've been down that road. I understand cars and I understand the challenges. And it's amazing to me how many parallels they are in cars and spirituality. You know, there's so many things that are equal or very close to being equal.
Give me a couple of examples.
To your walk. Well, we've, you know, you take the Good Samaritan.
Okay.
You know, I was with the National Street Rod Association. I'm still their chaplain for the National Association. And they have a deal called Fellow Pages. And basically it's for people that are on the road that have a problem. They can call somebody in Fellow Pages, and the commitment is they'll come help you. Which is, to me, that's the Good Samaritan, you know.
So if your car breaks down on the side of the road like a Harley might?
Yeah, they'll come and help you, you know, if they can. Or they'll find somebody that can come. You know, but for me, so much of what we do, redoing old cars, is much what Christ does for us in our lives, you know.
Restoration.
Restoration,
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, you know, I see those things. I write a column in the Street Scene magazine every month. I write one in Streetlight to illustrate what Christ will do for you, you know. And it's kind of fun. And we tell people all the time, you know, they said, where do you get those ideas? And I said, God just puts them in my head. I don't know. You know? He does have a sense of humor.
Yes, he does.
But no, it's you know, the thing for us is, and I spoke to you earlier about what started this ministry, you know, my walk with Christ goes way back. I was 8 years old when I accepted Christ.
Wow.
A little Baptist church in Roswell, New Mexico, South Hill Baptist Church. And I can remember the night that the invitation was given and I went forward. And Brother Bill Parsons was our pastor then. And I accepted Christ. And I had no doubt from that point forward where my eternal home was. But it wasn't until 1990, I was telling you about a buddy of mine that passed away, a street rod buddy, that I really came to Christ. You know, I was a follower for many years, was not a doer.
Wow.
You know, he wants followers, but he wants doers. You know, that's what the book of John tells us. You know, don't be a listener only, you know.
Don't just hear the word.
Don't just hear the word, but do it.
Right.
And when my street rod buddy passed away, God just broke my heart. He said all the years that we had spent on the side of the road talking about cars and engines and brakes and paint and front ends and rear ends and all the things that we covered, when that happened, I had no idea where he was going to spend eternity. And my commitment then was, God, you just show me how I can do it, and I'll do it. So for years we went taking vacation and, you know, going to car shows, and National Street Rod Association was the first one that gave me an opportunity to speak at their events. And it really blessed me to be able to visit with our friends and to tell them what I believe is true. And most of them go along with it. They got it, you know.
Right.
My fun stuff is when I get to one of those events in the summertime when it's really hot. And we've had some of those here in Granbury. And I always start the message by, look, if this heat's bothering you, you better listen to what I'm going to tell you. Because if this bothers you, where you're going is going to be really tough.
And the sun don't go down there.
And the sun don't go down. But anyway, that's kind of my deal in a nutshell. My stepdad was in the Air Force, and we traveled all over the world. And we spent time in Spain. We were charter members of the First Southern Baptist Church in Madrid.
Oh, wow.
Francisco Franco said, you can have a church here, but you can't have signs, no crosses, no way you can't, you know. And of course, it's predominantly Catholic. And
right.
So our family was involved in that mission work. And when my stepdad was there. And we left there, we came back to the States and been in a lot of different places. And, you know, it's interesting, the folks, how you're accepted in different communities.
Yes.
And I love the South because most of the time you're accepted.
Right.
You go to church and they'll be glad to see you. That's not necessarily the case in Maine or, you know, up in the Northeast. You know, they want to make sure you are who you are before they let you come. But then, you know, I don't begrudge anybody, you know. And of course, I grew up in a household where, you know, the Baptist was the way to do it.
Right.
Nobody else was right. You know, we just had certain ways to do it. And I told my pastor not too long ago, he's up in South Lake, and I said, I learned several years ago that a lot of Baptists haven't figured out, a lot of Pentecostals haven't figured out, a lot of Methodists haven't figured out, and there's a lot of Catholics that haven't figured out. And there's a whole lot, every one of them ain't got a clue. And our job is to bring everybody one step closer to Christ.
Right.
Whether you're a churchgoer or whether you've never been. You know, our opportunity is to come in and share his love with them and answer any questions they might have. And it's amazing to me when you get around these old car guys. They don't want to ask many questions in church, but when they get you in the after time,
yeah,
they say, hey, I meant to ask you, you know. But, and that's part of the deal. You know, we just have to be there and be a part. We do weddings and we do funerals, and you know, we just got to be there for them.
You know, Dale Carnegie says in How to Win Friends and Influence People, he says, always speak in the terms of the other person's interest.
Right.
And I think that we miss a lot of that. Today's society, according to Dr. Jordan Peterson, is a whole lot more narcissistic. You know, we've got young people today that are 15, 16, 20, 25, 35 years old that still have that toddler tyranny kind of mindset of the world. They want to get their way no matter what. They don't care what you think of it. They don't care how you feel. Their emotions are superior, and that's what really matters. And when you think about, you know, we ran into a gentleman yesterday, 83 years old, 83 years young. He was telling me, and I was like, well, you know, some people would say you're living on borrowed time. You know, at 83, he said, yeah, I accept that everybody in my family has lived to be 106, 103, 99 and a half. So I still got some time to serve. And he's got a fellow staying with him that was cussing at us and cussing at his dogs and, you know, all but kicking his dogs as he was moving around. He said, yeah, he's homeless. He's still a little rough around the edges. And so he introduced me to the fellow, and he says, this is my friend from church. He goes, I don't like church people. You know what I think about church people. I don't go to no church people. I don't trust none of them. Always got their hands out, always want your money. And walked around the corner, went on to the building, just, you know, continued to ignore that we were there. And I was like, that's interesting. And the old fellow looked back at me and he said, you know, sometimes you got to love them where they're at.
Yeah.
Even if where they're at's not on the way.
They might not be on the trip.
I think about the number of times that I've been around car guys. I think I was 9, Madison Avenue Baptist Church in Enid, Oklahoma, when I pushed Brother Byron O'Neill off the platform and said, one of these days I'm going to take your place. Been down a long road since then to get to where I am. But I also remember I was 15, the first time I unbolted the transmission from my 67 Chevy Impala and slid it back to replace the clutch in it by myself. underneath the car by myself,
Yeah.
had a hold of that transmission by myself. I thought I was just going to rest it on my chest and, do the little knickknacks that had to be done to put a new clutch and pressure plate in there. And no. So next thing I know, it's me and my mama underneath that Chevy Impala putting that clutch back in there. We did it 3 times before we got it right.
Right.
But it's amazing. I said then, moms and mechanics should be 8-armed, ambidextrous, and with a license to cuss. Because sometimes it seems like that's the only way that throw-up bearing's going back, the only way that rusted bolt is coming off there, the only way that axle's going to fit is with a little bit of cussing and a little bit of pressure. And that may not be the Christian way to do it, but sometimes it seems the only way to do it. Would you?
Well, we try to avoid that cussing part, but I'm gonna guarantee you there's a time or two when you get under there and you can't go any further. It reminds me of a story I heard about a guy that was going through the neighborhood, and there was a lawnmower sitting out in the front yard for sale, and preacher asked the young man there in the yard if that lawnmower was for sale. He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "Does it run?" "Oh yeah." So he bought it from him and took it home. Well, he got home and it wouldn't start. So he goes back and he tells the kid, he said, "Look, you said this thing would run." And he said, "It will." And he said, "I pulled and it wouldn't start." He said, "Did you cuss it?" He said, "No." He said, "Well, you cuss it a few times, it'll start." So it gets to be a deal, I mean, we love doing what we do. We love the old cars. And, if you're not real careful, you'll find a way to cuss at them. But
Sometimes they'll just make you cuss.
Yeah, most of the time they force you into it. But, we enjoy doing what we do. And that's the love of the Lord. And He gives you the desires of your heart.
So you've been doing this a little over 30 years?
Yeah, we started our ministry in 1990. And, of course, Linda and I have been married since 1969.
Wow.
And I told her, I said,
I was born in 68.
See, there you go. We got a son who was born late 69, so I, understand. But, it's a journey. And we've been on a journey for 55 years. And God has been good to us, never missed an opportunity to bless us or to help us.
Amen.
And sometimes people don't understand that part, You pray for His presence, and if you don't get exactly what you want, you'll probably get exactly what you need.
Yeah.
And that's been our experience over the years, that He's always there. He'll never leave you or forsake you. That's what the Scripture tells us. And the longer you're on that trail, the more you understand that. So that's us, in a nutshell.
So I'm guessing you've met some pretty interesting characters along the way, seen some very interesting cars that kind of express the personality of their creator, so to speak. I saw when I've been watching the Vegas rat rods, and they make some of the most interesting, that inline diesel with dual wheels looking, I think it came from a 34 coupe or something like that. Originally, it's some kind of hybrid mixed mash monster child of somebody's imagination. What's the most interesting thing you've seen that you would look at the car and say, yeah, that matches the personality of the owner?
Well, you almost, without exception, that happens every time you see a car. If you spend a little time with the owner, if he built it. Now, I'll differentiate between a builder and a buyer.
Okay.
A lot of times a buyer won't have any connection really, other than this beautiful car and I want to buy it.
And that usually because it has some kind of trade-in or resale value.
Yeah.
It's about the investment, not about the vehicle.
It's resale red or whatever the case might be. But, it's the built car, the one that a guy goes to the wrecking yard, and we talked about that a while ago about wrecking yards and going finding pieces for your car. And that's the way we came up,
Right.
Having to buy stuff for your car. And I was telling a story one time, we lived up in Missouri, and there was a wrecking yard in Montserrat, Missouri. I had a 55 Ford, and I needed brakes. You go to the parts store and buy brakes? No.
No.
Went to the wrecking yard. The guy in the wrecking yard sold me a set of brake shoes, all 4 wheels.
Wow.
I took them home, put them on my car. Well, I was a slick brake man, I'm tell you. but you do what you got to do. See,
Right.
anymore, I think the deal is, where can I buy it?
Right.
You know, how much is it going to cost to have somebody come, you know? And we just beat and bang, you know, and that's probably not the best way to do it, but you do what you have to do to make it work.
Well, and it's a character builder. I mean, you see these kids today. I watched my boys when all the racing games came out on Xbox and PlayStation. I'm trying to remember the name of a couple of them, but Gran Turismo, I think, was the one that the kids spent the most amount of time on, where if you won a certain amount of races, you got to upgrade. Mm-hmm. And often I would sit there and watch them, and I would see them, you know, I could get all of these upgrades, and there's a turbocharger, there's a supercharger, there's a NOS kit, there's a ground kit, there's new wheels, there's tinted windows, there's louvers you can put on it. And 9 times out of 10, what they chose to add to the car, knowing that the only way you get more upgrades is to win more races, it was all cosmetic. Yeah. It was aesthetics. And I'm looking at it going, well, yeah, so your windows are pretty, but you're still slow. Yeah. I mean, you got a turbo there. Well, keep saving up, win a few more races and buy the turbo, then you can win more races. That just makes sense to me. But it's something in the way young people think today. And I mean, I have to be honest, I was 16 years old. I was walking home from the grocery store where I worked for $3.10 an hour. And an old man had a car sitting in his backyard, filled to the top with mason jars. And I saw him out in the garden, and my buddy and I stopped, and Ronnie and I looked at the old man. I'm like, would you sell that car? And he goes, who would want it? I said, what would you sell it for? He said, I don't know, give me $300 and you can have it. And so it took me 2 weeks to pay that off because my paycheck wasn't that big. But we unstacked all the mason jars out of there. He pulled his other car up there and jump-started that car. It started on the first lick. And I drove it from my sophomore year of high school till the first year in college before I went off to the Air Force. 67 Chevy Impala with a 3-speed on the tree. Mm-hmm. The car was bigger than a tugboat. You could have landed a C5 on the trunk deck of that car. You put 7 people in the trunk. We know. We tried. We put 5 in the back seat, 6 in the front seat, and still shifted gears going down the road. Broke the clutch cable on it the first time. It wasn't even a clutch cable. We broke a motor mount, and the engine shifted enough that the little flapper that goes to the bell housing was just flapping free, and every time I'd push the clutch down. So I had to throw it into neutral at 40 miles an hour and wait for it to come to a stop. Drove it to the master cylinder, went out, and the only way we could stop it with 9 people in the car was run into a brick wall with it. Didn't even scar the bumper. We had so many adventures in that car, but learned to change at the master cylinder, learned to change the brake shoes the first time, putting a new clutch in that thing, rebuilding the bits and pieces. Never had to touch the engine, not so much as a valve cover gasket on that thing. But all the things that my buddies and I learned underneath that car, the relationships we built. Like you said, we talked about motors and transmissions and rear ends and front ends and axles and shocks and you name it. But how often did the kingdom come into that? See, after the journey of that car, though, paid $300 for it, traded it for a pool cue.
Wow.
I thought I did pretty good with that pool cue, so my roommate put it in a pawn shop for $100. He didn't know that stick was worth about $3,500. So I actually did okay. I paid $300. I traded for $3,500 and then lost it for $100. So the next time around, I had a chance to do that. I had a bonus check, and I went and bought an old Mustang out of a Volkswagen dealership. Another one I cranked up, started. We put aftermarket. Actually, didn't even have to have aftermarket exhaust. We put wheels and tires on it and cleaned it up and traded it for $3,500 to $9,000. And then traded that up and ended up with $12,000 worth of value out of this old $3,500 Mustang.
There you go.
But Christ does exactly the same thing. He takes that $300 junkyard car that's beat to death, that's fallen apart, that you're not even sure it's going to make it home. He looks at our life and the train wreck that we are, and he says, let's make some tweaks on that. I can up the value a little bit. Mm-hmm. But he looks at the value of what we were made to be, not where we are. Right. Not the junkyard car that won't even start, but the original creation. And it goes back to what you said a while ago. There's a big difference between a buyer and a builder. The creator looks at us and says, I know what you were made to be, which means I know what you're capable of. Mm-hmm. It's like that barn find when you see the 67 Shelby and you're like, Looks like a
Yes, it
rusty
is.
bucket of bolts, but I know what that is,
Yeah.
and I know what that could be, and I know what it's worth.
Right.
And I'm guessing now you've got a pretty good eye to look at a car from a distance and go, yeah, that was a backyard paint job, or that was baked on in the right kind of environment. And tell me about your eye for spotting the value in a car from a distance that other people might overlook.
Well, of course, you build these things through the years. There are certain cars that always, you were talking about the Shelby, there are certain things that you see and you know right away that's different,
Right.
And it's got to have value if it's a little different,
Right.
Over the years, right now, I told you that I've got I had a 67 Nova. That was my first car.
Wow.
Bought a brand new Valley Chevrolet out in New Mexico, and drove it off the showroom floor. And my wife and I dated in that car. I ended up selling it, and I'd have another one today if I could find another one. I've had 3 over the years.
Wow.
And but they held a special place for me, and because of the memories that we made, now I've got a '37 Ford flatback sedan,
Wow.
which is pretty cool. It's got a Chevrolet motor in it. It made Ford tough with Chevy stuff.
How else are you going to make Ford tough? Let's just send it to Shelby.
I've got a '38 Chevrolet that's it's got a 327 300 horse
Wow.
out of a '66 Impala, and we've had that car since 1983. We put it
Wow.
on the road, and got 140,000 miles on it, and we drive it. I mean, it's but we're users.
Right.
I don't want to
Not collectors.
Yeah, I don't want to sit and tell you about my car. I want to show you.
Right.
And they say, man, you're wearing that thing out. You're going out all over. We bought this 37 flatback. The purpose of that was to buy it from a buddy of ours and reuse it or go with it while we were redoing the 38, because it had 140 on it, and we were going to freshen it up. And so now we've got 109,000 miles on the 37, and we still haven't done the 38. But I love cars. I love the 60s, the muscle cars. Something special about the dealerships that built those cars, or the factories that built them and put them in a showroom,
Right.
that could do the kind of things they did. And not necessarily the smartest thing, but we had them and it was good, So I've had friends of mine that have had Volkswagens. They've had most anything. One of the guys I went to high school with had a Rambler station wagon that his folks gave him, and try as we couldn't make that thing peel out. There are certain things you just can't do. But
We had a Rambler wagon. We made it squeal the tires.
It is slamming on the brakes.
No, it didn't have a parking stop between neutral and reverse. And we tried to go from first to second to third, and I missed drive and went all the way to reverse, and it slid down the road with the wheel spinning backwards for probably 50 yards.
That's crazy. But that's to
We
me
still drove it home.
that's car stuff, man. I love it. Like I say, we come down here, and there's some folks here that bring cars that they've had, their parents have had. We've got one gentleman in the Street Rod Association that's 3rd generation. He's got a 34 Ford that his dad had.
Wow.
And after his dad passed, Troy got it, and Troy redid it. It's a beautiful car. Now his son is building a pickup, and he's got a brother that's in. So, bring other people along with what we're doing. And I tell people the easiest way to explain what we do, it's like a family reunion with cars.
Well, and it's a good mechanism. I mean, we talk all the time. I do mentorship and leadership training and stuff of that nature. And it's hard sometimes just to get a kid to sit down, a teenager, to sit down and have a conversation. My world revolves around books and teaching and speaking and that kind of thing. But, I remember walking through Bass Pro Shop one day, and there's this beautiful picture. It was huge, probably 40 by 40, hanging on the wall at Bass Pro Shop. And it's an old guy sitting on the tailgate of his pickup, fishing with his little boy. And I nudged my son. I said, "Is that cool or what?" And he looked at me. He was probably 20 years old at the time. He looked at me and goes, "Yeah, but you never took me fishing."
Ooh.
Well, that's a hard one. But I can tell you today, that boy by himself replaced fuel rail, fuel filter, fuel injectors, and fuel pump in his brother's car, sitting in the front of my house with a box of tools you could carry in your purse.
Mm-hmm.
And both of my boys have learned how to turn a wrench, when to turn a wrench, what to replace, how to do the diagnostics. They have their own tools, their own tool kits.
Yeah.
And they've become fairly self-sufficient in that. And while I may not have taken them fishing, I did teach them to change a set of brakes at 12, 14 years old.
Right.
We were like a pit crew on the side of the road. People would be pulled over trying to get a flat fixed. And I remember stopping one time right outside the airport. The lady was all dressed up and sitting in her car, and we pulled over in our Ford Excursion. And she said, I've already called AAA. I said, okay, it's 110 degrees out here. You got a full tank of gas? And she said, I got about a quarter. And I said, I'd be willing to bet we can have your tire changed before you can call AAA back and cancel the call. But I'll promise you that we'll be done with lunch before AAA comes to see you.
Wow. Yeah.
She was like, are you sure that's true? I said, yeah, we have AAA.
Yeah.
We don't call them. And so we changed our flat and moved on. My boys were 10 and 12 years old at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they could get that jack out of the car, get the four-wheel off, get that tire off the car and put it back on there faster than you can get AAA on the phone. And that's values transferred.
Yeah,
That,
exactly.
That's what the word means when it says, preach the gospel, then make disciples.
Right.
And so in the car world, you've got that relationship that goes way beyond the doctrinal ideas, the preacher stuff that you preach from the talk. It's just a talk. It's just a conversation.
Yeah.
I'm going to sit here and talk to you about the wheels on your 32 all day long, but it doesn't really matter if you die and go the wrong direction.
Well, and that's, when our kids were growing up, I have a son, the oldest, and two daughters. And they grew up around cars. They went to rod runs with us, and it actually became some of the guys that were in the car stuff were more like uncles to them than family. They were like family. And I didn't realize that until one year we had one of the guys pass away, and my wife and the girls came to the funeral. I did his funeral, and they came through after it was over. And it just broke the girl's heart. I mean, both of them just bawling.
Wow.
Because their uncle was gone, and that's the way they considered him. And, but for us, when the kids were growing up, I told my son, if you need something, you're going to buy the parts. Now, I help you change them, but you got to have a job. You got to be able to do what you need to do. The girls, I told them, I'm not asking you to come out there and get your hands dirty, but you're going to be there with me while I do it. And you'll get tools or do whatever I need to get you through.
Yeah.
Okay. And I said, you're not going to the mall. You're not going to sit in the house, talk on the phone.
Not while I'm doing your work. No.
Yeah, not if I'm out there working on your car. And that's, and as we grew up, as they grew up, they had a certain amount of skill. You was talking about brakes a while ago. I got to tell you a quick story about my son. He had a buddy of his in high school, had a Camaro. They came over to the house and he said, Dad, I told Richard you'd change the brakes on his Camaro. I said, you're out of your mind. And he said, what? Do you know how to do it? And I said, I know I do. You're going to know how to do it shortly.
You better learn.
Yeah, you're going to learn. So he got the jack out and they jacked it up. And I told him it's simple. You pull the rear wheel off, look at the brake shoes, okay? And you can take them apart. And if you have a question, go to the other side and look at it and duplicate it, okay? Oh, okay, that don't sound too hard. So they took one side down, tore it all apart, and then they went and looked at the other side. They came back, put the first side back together. And my son said, Dad, this don't look right. So when I looked at it, and I said, it's not right. He said, why? And I said, you did it exactly like the other side. And he said, that's what you said. I said, no, it's a mirror image.
Yeah.
So you have to reverse that side to put on this side. Well, you should have told me that. And I said, well, I could have, but you'll remember now.
Yeah, you'll never forget that.
You'll never forget it. So they finished up the brakes. Everything worked fine. But that was the way we tried to teach, It's not always easy,
Right.
but you do it right. And so we didn't have much trouble from there. Now my son has got to the point, he's an engineer now, so he's in the big bucks. He don't work on cars.
Yeah, he
He'll
pays
take it
somebody else to do
somewhere.
that. Yeah.
But my grandson bought a Mazda Miata last year.
Wow.
He's been working on it. He's already changed the front end, already redone the brakes, and this boy, what he wants for Christmas is tools.
There you go.
So last year we gave him jack stands and a jack, and oh man, you thought he's gone to heaven, But I try to tell him, it skipped a generation,
Yeah.
but those genes are still there. And kid loves it. We're going down to his graduation in May. So, it's another one of those deals. It's a progression as you go along.
I remember my oldest son, who's now 27, he was dating a girl, middle school, early high school, something like that. None of them were driving yet. And it was hot, August, and had to put brakes on the back of my Suburban. And so I told the boys, you need to come help me. And his girlfriend was over to visit. And he's like, can I wait till she leaves? I said, only if she leaves like in the next hour, because any later it's going to be after dark. And if I don't put the brakes back on, I can't take her home by her curfew. Mm-hmm. So we need to take the back wheels off and get the brakes done. And he, fussed with me back and forth. But, they were in that phase where they pretty much did what Dad said. And so I went and changed my clothes. I came back up the stairs and walk out to the driveway. And when I get to the driveway, she's sitting on the curb. She's changed into shorts and a tank top too, got a pair of gloves on. She's like, what do I do first? And she dug in, first set of brakes she'd ever changed in her life. She went home bragging to her grandpa about having changed brakes. And to this day, it's been a while now, at least a decade. Every time I see that little girl, she's like, Mr. Norris, I'll never forget my first brake job. And it's those little endearing moments of connection, sometimes that last longer than the greatest sermon you could ever preach.
Sure.
I mean, you lay all the facts out in front of them, but it's the who that you are that penetrates, and it's finding that common ground. What's important to them? How do you discuss that with them? My youngest daughter, the day she got her driver's license, my grandmother had given her a car that was 3 years older than her. She was born in 95. The car was a 92. And I said, before we drive home, it's about 85 miles home, I said, pull over in the Walmart parking lot and rotate the tires. She's like, what? Huh? I said, you need to rotate the tires. And my sons and I pulled out a lawn chair and supervised. We didn't touch a thing. Oh, she was mad. She was cussing me. She was screaming at me. She was crying. She was everything else. Changed all 4 of those tires out. We're driving home 75 miles an hour on I-35, and the rear right tire blew out. Had she not rotated those tires, it wouldn't have been the rear right. It would have been the front right, and that would have been the end.
Yeah.
Miracle. The better part was, car spun around, slid down the highway in traffic a little bit. I tried to control it with the parking brake, but that didn't work because it stuck. Off through the ditch, onto the service road, never stalled, never flipped, never nothing. We got to the side of the road. She turned off the engine. Then she slapped me 5 times. She said, why did you grab the brake? I had it under control. I'm like, no, not even close, but okay.
Okay.
But, we ended wheels up on the service road, changed the flat onto a spare, and kept going. And I look back now and I think, how many times, like your friend who passed on, and there's no way to know until you get there which way he went. But how many times do we miss those little opportunities where that teachable moment, that connection over what seems trivial is
Right.
just missed? So I know you got a show coming up in Granbury. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about that event, how people can get involved. What's the best way for them to participate in this coming up event?
Well, the best way to get involved, we of course we have a website. It's LSSRA.com.
Okay.
The show is June 7th, 8th, and 9th. It's right down here in Hewitt Park.
Okay.
Registration, you can register online or you can register at the show.
And now you don't have to register to look at the car. You just have to register if you want to show your car.
If you want to show your car, you have to register. And, we're a 1983 back at this
Okay.
juncture.
So if your car's an 87, stay at home with it.
Yeah, you can't
Or
bring
drive it through the parking lot.
Come
but
on,
you can't.
drive it. You can park it over in the Hilton Garden Inn and walk across the street. But no, we are opening the event up next year, our 50th anniversary show.
Wow.
It's going to be a 30-year rolling date. So next year, if you have a car that's even as 95,
Oh, wow.
you can bring it. Not this year, but next year.
I have a 95.
See, you could register and drive it out there.
It's an E350 bus.
Hey, whatever.
Ugly as sin, but it pulls a good trailer.
Well, that's what I told my boss years ago at NSRA when they opened to a 30-year rolling date. And we went to the Nationals in Louisville, Kentucky, and that's a 11,000 car event. I mean,
Wow.
It's huge. And I was looking at the park, and there's a guy come in with a dump truck. And I asked the boss, I said, what's that all about? He said, it fits the year criteria,
Yeah.
and he's got money.
Hey, if
paid
he's willing
his
to pay the
entry,
money
so
to
he's
register
here.
it, bring it on.
I said,
I didn't say you're going to win, but you're here.
You're here.
There's an old guy here in town. I think he's 97 years old. And he says, I won more marathons than anybody else. First place.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's been competing in that 90 and older category for the
90 and
last
older.
7 years. And who else is going to run against him? There's nobody in the race.
I thought you were going to tell the story. I had a guy who used to work for Montgomery Ward's, I did. And he had an older big car, a Buick. And he would come in, he had every receipt that he had ever done at Montgomery Ward's, and they were all lifetime.
Wow.
So when the brakes went out, he'd come in and he said, thumb through, here's my receipt for my brakes. Everything was free.
I do that with AutoZone with my alternators and batteries and O2 sensors and all that kind of stuff.
Now, I'll give you a little tip on old cars if anybody's listening and they won't pay attention. Start a deal in the computer, a parts list.
Mm-hmm.
Every part you buy for your car, the date, the part number, where you got it, okay? Because one of these days, you're going to go out to that car and you're going to need a alternator or set of plugs or whatever it might be. And you go to the parts store and they'll say, what year is it? Well, it's a 37 Ford. It's got a 350 motor in it. Carry your little sheet in there and you say, I need some R44 TSs.
Right.
Oh, okay. Went into a parts store in Hearst several years ago. Need a set of disc pads we're putting on a street rod. And he said, what's it on? I did the same routine. It's a 38 Chevrolet. They don't list that. I said, give me a set of D52 disc pads. He said, what are you talking about? I said, they're up on your shelf right there. I can see them from here. D52. That's a Chevrolet disc pad. Been that way for years. Now it's changed now some. But if you have a little knowledge when you go in, it helps.
Well, if you got a resto mod and you've added an A-frame from something else, and I think the best Mazda Miata I've ever seen was one that was set over. It was a 1965 Mustang convertible body,
Mm-hmm.
and apparently the footprint, the wheelbase, and everything is identical to the Mazda Miata. And so it was a Mazda Miata with no skin, but a 65 Mustang skin on it with all the modern accoutrements of Miata. And I was like, I bet that's a quick little car with a little inline six in it. So it was a beautiful. I saw somebody do the same thing with a 39 Ford pickup over an SSR. Mm-hmm. That was a sweet little ride.
Yeah.
I was a little jealous of that one.
It takes time, but you know.
But that you look at those parts, and if somebody looks out the window and they're like, we don't have parts for anything that old, you're like, well, that's great because that motor's a 2007 LS.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. It came out right out of a Suburban. I think you'll be okay with the parts on that. Okay. Yeah. And it's pretty funny with it's good advice though. Just make a list.
Keep a list
and hang on to it. Check it twice.
It's in the computer. I've got one on the 37, one on the 38. I even had one on my buddy's 37 Chevrolet pickup.
Oh, wow.
I kept for him. He'd call me and say, I got these today. I put it in there. But
my son's an assistant manager of a parts store in Euless. If you've ever been into O'Reilly's and you see somebody that looks like me, that's my boy.
That's your boy, huh?
Yeah, looks just like me with red facial hair.
Yeah. Well, we've done a lot of parts stores. O'Reilly's
I bet.
and AutoZone. Well, that my grandson, was telling you that James, my son, never could get him. He built computers. My grandson,
Mm-hmm.
and then he decided he wanted to buy a Miata. And my son said, I just want a car. I want to build it. Okay, so they bought this car, and he's been in the process of redoing it, and that's his pride and joy. I mean, he loves it.
And he'll take care of that like nothing ever given to him.
Yeah, and it's you couldn't run fast enough to give me a Miata. I couldn't get in it. But that's another story.
My 83-year-old friend was telling me the other day he's trying to sell his car. He's got a 560 SL two-door.
Ooh.
And I've been in a friend's BMW Z4. And you got to sit down in that thing, pull your knees behind your ears, and rotate to get your feet in it, because the door hinge is further back than your hips.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way you can step in there and sit down, because you'll be falling on your face. And I look at those little cars, I'm like, they're so cute, and they look like a load of fun to drive, but it's like wearing a shoe. Yeah. You're not going to get out of it in a hurry.
Well, I've owned a few Corvettes, and I had a 61.
Yeah.
That I love that car. Convertible, that's back in when they still had trunks.
Right.
And I had to take the armrest off the door so I could let the clutch out. Because my legs so long, I'd hit the armrest before I got the clutch released. And people would see that and say, "Why don't you put that armrest back on?" Well, I like to drive it.
I'd like to be able to go somewhere. The last manual transmission vehicle we got rid of was our F-250 6-speed, because my little wife would push the clutch in, and by the time she'd get the gear shift in, it'd be pushing her back over the seat. She'd have to cinch her seatbelt down and hold on, because she'd be rising up out of the seat. Couldn't reach the brake or the gas anymore.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, that's, the boy I was telling you about earlier that's got the 34 that it belonged to his dad. He's got a 6-speed in that car.
Wow.
And loves it. I mean, that's his trademark.
Really?
Said, "Oh, that's the car that got the 6-speed." Yep, that's it.
Wow.
But it's good stuff. I mean, I just like I tell everybody, if you don't like old cars, come to the car show. If you don't like colorful paint, come to the car show. Because if you get there, you'll find something you like.
Right.
I don't care who you are. And there's some neat people, and they will visit with you, spend the afternoon with you. Just don't put your hands on their car unless they tell you. That was an example I made one time in a message. I don't know how much time we got, but
about 15 minutes.
Okay. I told people that drive your car to an event, and your relationship with Christ is a whole lot like your car. When you first get there, you don't want anybody touching it. Mm-hmm. But you sit there a while. If you visit with the owner, a lot of times they'll say, "Well, come on, I'll give you a ride." And you'll get in the car and you go ride with them. And a lot of people stop there, and they do with their walk with Christ as well. They just want to ride.
Yeah, just check it out.
Check it out. Go a little bit further, and the guy will say, "Hey, here's the keys, drive it." That's the next step, drive it. The next step is to give the keys to your guy, whoever it is. That's the way Jesus does us. All right, here you go. You can drive it. You take control of it. But you remember what I told you, And if you can get in a guy's car and drive it without him having to go with you, you have arrived with a street rod.
That's stewardship.
Yeah. And Christ is the same way. He wants you to enjoy what you do. He wants you to give you the ability to do what you need to do. And when it's all said and done, you're going home with him.
Yeah.
And at
the end of the day, the ride's still his.
Yeah, it's still his. He's still the boss.
And we forget sometimes where the ownership fits.
Yes.
What's ours and what's his. So what's the point of doing church at the car show?
Well, there are a lot of people in the car business or car world that don't make a habit of going to church. it gives them an opportunity to go. And it's not, nothing is going to bother them, you know. You know, for me, we've got guys that wouldn't go in a church on a bet.
Right.
We do Motorhead Sundays around the Metroplex. I did one not too long ago up in South Lake. 9 o'clock Sunday morning, come to the church, have some coffee and donuts, go inside, have a service that I do, and we have a quartet that'll sing. We come back after and have lunch. And it's in a non-forceful way. We're just there to visit. Let's talk about it. I told our pastor after we did the first one at our home church, we had people join the church. They come by, see the cars, and they stop. I said, the biggest challenge for us at a church house is to make sure that the people understand that when somebody comes to visit, they may not have any idea in their mind that they want to go to that church.
Right.
They just want to look at cars.
Yeah.
Don't get out there and get crazy. You know, just go out and smile, invite them to the church if they want to come, and they'll come. We've done that at several churches over the years. And I've had some people say, well, you can come do a Motorhead Sunday, but we're going to do it on Saturday. I said, no, I don't do that. You know, I'm not a Seventh-day Adventist, and I don't do church on Saturday. No offense.
It's not my thing.
It's not my thing.
Find somebody else.
But for me, you know, and I've actually had pastors tell me, well, you're not going to get my pulpit.
Okay.
I said,
since you own it.
Whose pulpit is it? You know, maybe we need to have a little conversation. But, you know, I understand all that, and everybody's got their deal, you know.
Right.
But we like to go and just have people come and look at cars. And car guys come in to church, and they'll look around, make sure nothing's going to fall down on them, you know.
It didn't burst into flames in the first 5 steps.
No, come on, buddy. You know, but, you know, that's us.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure people come. We want to make sure they're welcome. They may not dress the way we dress, but that's okay.
In 2005, we accidentally started a DJ business.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I noticed were a lot of radio remotes at events, car shows, trade shows, school launches, you know, whatever else, Easter egg hunts, 5K runs. And I would see people show up, they got these tiny little sound systems. And they'd put them up out there. The minute a Suburban parks next to them, you can't even tell they're there. I'm like, I want something bigger than that. And when I worked at Verizon, we had sponsored an event on the beach. And this guy backed up with a semi-trailer. And we thought he was going to be late. In fact, I had already been in touch with the guy who was running the event. And I said, we paid for the sponsorship. We paid for the music. Our name's supposed to be on the stage. You got 10,000 people out here. I don't see a single stage.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, just wait. Just wait. Just wait. I was about losing my cool. And I hear the music, but it sounded like it was somebody with their stereo turned up really loud and the windows up in their car.
Mm-hmm.
And this semi backs onto the beach, drops down the side of his semi-trailer. And the band is already playing. Enormous sound system, generators running the whole 9 yards. And I'm like, it's a band in a box. That's pretty cool.
That's cool.
But I don't want to be driving through somebody's neighborhood with a semi.
No.
So we built one out of a 12-foot box trailer. It's got a double subfloor on it. And the whole door would drop down into a stage and had a 5,000 watt sound system that would roll out. We'd have microphones. You could dance on the stage. And we've used it everything from malls to T-Mobile's grand opening, 18 stores. We did all their grand openings, and we'd pull up in the parking lot and shout at cars in traffic, and they'd make a wheel and come back in just for the music and the conversation. But we've done the Haltom City Car Show to benefit the Haltom City High School for 8 or 9 years. And recently we converted that trailer. Didn't have a stage on it anymore. We took the stage door off and put in a plexiglass bulletproof window. So we can do podcasts from inside there. So we do this inside the trailer, live in an event, with speakers outside, or without the speakers outside if there's already something else going on. But we just open the back door and allow people to come in, have a seat, tell us what's going on in your world, and we call it curating Jesus stories. So we do the same thing at this show, but in a 5-minute interview format.
Cool.
And we're always looking for events where the story of Christ is a familiar and friendly story. So we can just roll that rig up there and go, come tell us about Jesus in your life. Give us 5 minutes. Give us a 5-minute clip we can share all over social media and put on TV. And it's amazing how many people have a story. The minute you open the floodgates, tell me about your car. Tell me about your Jesus. Tell me about your wife. Tell me about your kids. I remember years and years ago, I was playing racquetball with a guy in the Air Force, and I said, he said, you know, my wife and I are just having such a hard time, I think we're getting a divorce. And I said, well, do you love her? He said, yeah. I said, how do you know? I mean, describe that love. And he just looked at me like a deer in the headlights. He had no idea. And I said, well, what kind of car do you drive? He goes, oh, I got a 67 El Camino before the SS, but we made it into an SS. And I said, well, what kind of seats it got in it? And he went all the way down to the size of bolts it took to put the new seats in the El Camino. I mean, he knew everything about it. I said, it's funny to me that you love your wife like you love your car, but you know a lot more about your car than you know about your wife. And that conversation sparked a relationship that lasted the entire time I was assigned to that base. It's amazing when you find that interest of somebody else's and get them talking about those other things. And so it sounds like that's what you've been doing with the car show.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to do with our mobile entertainment and everything else that we do in the marketplace is go where they're at, figure out what sparks their interest, and get the conversation started until we can get them to tell those stories, because we overcome the evil one by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. But if your testimony isn't rehearsed even in your own head, it's never going to get out there in the public. It's never going to black eye the enemy, and it's never going to lead somebody else to say, okay, Lord, I thought you only knew about cars.
Yeah.
But you also know about Christ. That's pretty cool.
That's cool.
So answer questions that I don't know anything about. And like you said, that doesn't often happen in the pews. That doesn't happen on Sunday morning in the service. It happens when you pull up a lawn chair and sit and talk to an old guy about his 32 Chevy.
Yeah, that's the truth. And, you know, it's what I told somebody not too long ago, that if you look at what Jesus did in his ministry, I'm not comparing myself to him in any shape or fashion. He talked to people about what they knew every day.
Yep. Talk to farmers about dirt.
Yeah.
Talk to lawyers about law.
Yeah. Talk to sheep herders about sheep.
Yeah.
I mean, he talked about the things that made sense to them.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do in a car show. Let me talk about things that make sense to you. And, you know, it's pretty cool if you can do it.
Yeah, it goes way beyond the analogy and into the depth of the relationship.
Right. So we've been managing to do that for a long time. I think I'm fixing to write my 300th article.
Wow.
For Street Scene, the national publication. And, you know, somebody said, I've heard that before. And I said, well, you write stuff out of the Bible 300 times, you're going to hear the same stuff a couple of times.
Hey, I've been studying John Maxwell for 30 years. He's got over 100 books published. I probably own 50 of them. And it's amazing how many of the same stories appear in every book. Some of those stories, you just can't write a book without them.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. But I think it was Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun.
Nope.
Packaged a little different, lived by a different somebody, but same story.
Same story. But, and that's the deal. And, you know, for me, the answer to this world and our situation is Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Getting back to God. And, you know, you'll try to say that to people and roll their eyes and walk away, you know, but that's the bottom line of the whole deal.
Yeah.
Until we get back in His graces, we're struggling. We're fighting uphill.
Yeah.
You know.
I hear people argue, is it going to be Trump or Biden for president? I'm like, why do we need either one? We already got a king.
Yeah.
We just learned to listen to the king we have. We'd be much better off.
Well, I tell everybody, you know, we have our political preferences and all that kind of stuff. But I told a guy several weeks ago that understand this. God is still in control.
Yeah.
We're going to get whoever God tells us we're going to have, you know. And if we don't do what we need to do, then we'll get somebody else. But no matter what you do, God's still in control.
Yeah.
He's going to decide whether to bless us or not bless us, and that's up to us.
Saw somebody the other day had a shirt on that said, "I'm living in the fog." I was like, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Maybe you need a little clarity.
Yeah.
Then I was talking to somebody else, and he said, momentum always is better than clarity. I said, what? He said, yeah, if you're moving, you come to clarity faster. I said, unless it's in the fog, then you might want to slow down a little bit because you don't know what's coming next.
Don't know what's coming.
He kind of looked at me, he's like, I've never thought of it that way. But then when I asked the person about their shirt, I'm living in the fog, they said, yeah, it's an abbreviation for the favor of God. I said, oh, I could deal with the living in that kind of fog. You didn't have to turn your bright lights on, right?
Yeah, no.
Just
I'm glad you said that.
Pedal to the metal and hope for the best. Living in the favor of God.
That's like the T-shirt I saw at the Nationals one year. It was, I can fix broke, I can't fix stupid.
Yeah.
And I wrote an article, that says, I know the guy that can fix broke and stupid.
I think that was a promise, wasn't it? He said, if you lack wisdom, just ask.
Just ask.
I'll give it to you.
Yeah.
And whatever you ask, believe it.
That's it.
And I think that's the hardest part for me. Just believing.
Just believing.
Yeah.
Well, we run into that, and I have just recently with a good friend of ours that's going through some chemotherapy and through some cancer. And he said, Jim, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? I don't know if I'm okay. And let's sit down and talk about this. So I spent several evenings with him, and we always end with prayer. And he said, I think I got it. And I said, that's the deal. You just got to believe.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the hardest part. When it's right in your face and you have a hard time believing.
I was talking to one of my mentors the other day, an older guy, and I said, I had a friend that recently passed of cancer. And when I went to visit him in the hospital, he asked me the same question that Lazarus' sister asked. What took you so long to come to me? And after he passed, I felt that conviction that said, you're the only one he knew who held the theology that you could lay hands on the sick and they would be healed. Everybody else he knew didn't believe that kind of stuff, but you never prayed it. And so when I told my friend that, he said, I used to pray for a lot of sick people, and I'd see God do unbelievable miracles. And they would say to me, you're just a sensationalist. And he said, I'm not the sensationalist. My God is.
Yeah.
Everything Jesus did was sensational. What do you think a miracle is? And I was like, that's a whole new way to look at it. And then he said to me, young man, what I want you to do is spend some time praying that God will put you in a place where faith is required so that you'll do the miraculous because you have to. I was like, are you trying to scare me? Because it's working.
Yeah.
it's working.
You're doing good, man.
Yeah. I believe that was the prayer of the disciples, though, wasn't it? He said, just believe. And they said, help my unbelief. Any last words, Jim, before we wrap up today? You got sponsors for the show? Do you need more sponsors for the show coming up, Jim?
Yes, we do have sponsors for the show. And of course, Eric was nice enough to bring them printed out for me. But Painless Performance Products, they do wiring in the street rods and race cars. They've been a major sponsor of ours for years. Randy Watson and Taylor Transmission. Randy gives us a transmission every year to give away.
I need one for my Suburban.
Okay, come on. Napa Auto Parts. We have a toolbox we give away every year. And
that's pretty cool.
Napa's been nice enough. It's not a toolbox, it's a toolbox.
Like a big rolling chest.
Yeah, it's a big rolling chest.
Wow.
And Jerry Coleman Trucking up in Broken Bow, Oklahoma. We even let people from Oklahoma come sponsor.
Wow.
Hey. Barrett Equipment out of Midland. Walton Customs out of Round Mountain, Texas. Pressman Printing, they do all this printing stuff for us. And ABC Auto out in East Texas. Nin and Jan Hewlett out of Granbury.
Yeah.
You remember him, he used to be the mayor here.
Hewlett Park, yeah.
Yeah. And Visit Granbury. Those folks are dynamite, I'm telling you.
Tammy Dooley's a special kind of person.
Oh, man, I'm telling you. And, of course, we're looking for some good stuff because this is our 49th year. Next year will be 50.
Wow.
And that's a pretty good pretty good hit.
That's a good milestone.
To get 50 rod runs. We would have been 50 this year, but COVID cheated us one year.
I can see that.
We didn't have the event, so everybody said, "No, this is your 50th," and I said, "No, it ain't."
50 calendar years, but not 50
calendar years,
events,
but not. But anyway, if you get an opportunity, I'm going to leave some of these with you.
And I've already put a link in the description below, so anybody that's watching on any of the social media tools, they can click on that and go right to your website and register there.
Super.
Check out the event dates and everything that's going on. I know it's already on the Visit Granbury website, and we'll put it out there on Facebook and social media and share this around as well.
But we're just a bunch of old car guys and gals. I don't want to forget them, because I'm going to tell you, if it wasn't for the ladies, we'd be in deep trouble.
Where would we be without them?
Where would we be? But, you know, our deal with the association, you know, it started several years ago with 16 people, 1974.
Wow.
Put the club together in Austin, Texas. And now we're like 700-800.
Wow.
Across the state. And hey, it's about camaraderie, it's about membership, it's about safety, recognition for what we do, the association, and participation. We want people to come and enjoy. And you know, we'll have a couple hundred at the state run, which is probably a third of our membership.
Wow.
Wish they'd all come. Of course, that would be a problem.
It would, because 200 pretty much filled the park.
Yeah, it gets full.
Yeah.
But we still want you to come, want you to enjoy yourself, and don't miss Sunday morning. I mean, you might want to go home early, but we'll wrap up at noon. But Sunday morning, we'll have Living Water from here in Granbury, quartet.
Very nice.
They'll bless your heart, I promise you.
Very good. Jim, I appreciate you taking time to drive down today and spend some time with us.
Hey, it was my pleasure, buddy. Good to meet you.
And
we'll see you at the park, huh?
Absolutely. We'll be there with the camera at least. And I want to say thanks to all of you for being a part of what we're doing here at Storypower TV. Like, subscribe, share this video. You're going to see it out there on social media and various forums. And when you do, realize that there are guys who are more in tune to thinking about their old cars and their classics and their transmissions than there are the Kingdom. It's a good video to share with them, because maybe they need to hear something other than what's going to come from the pulpit on a Sunday morning. Maybe they need to realize there are guys out there that'll just sit down and have a chat with you over a broken motor and still love you like the Kingdom. If that's somebody you know, send them this video. Tell them to come check out the car show, June 6, 7, 8, and 9, right here in Granbury, Texas. Come and be a part of it. There's plenty of beds and breakfast, plenty of hotels. There's one right across the street if you get your reservations early. But hey, our offices aren't here on the square. Come down and see us down here as well. Stop in while you're in town and enjoy the visit to Granbury. It's worth the trip. I'm J. Loren Norris with Storypower TV, and I appreciate you being here. Have a blessed day.